Today I have Jeff Walker, I guess formerly of JP Morgan, came over from the dark side to the enlightened side, as we like to think, in social entrepreneurship, and is now running this fabulous organization called Millennium Promise. I've asked Jeff to talk with us a little bit about his work with Millennium Promise, but also because we are in our module now looking at finance and financing social enterprise, also to talk a little bit about that and his experience with that, impart some advice, some war stories about fundraising, sustaining financing, and so talk to you a little bit about that as well. Like our other guests, he's very open to questions and very much wants this to be an interactive dialogue. So do not feel like you have to wait for the requisite 30 minutes to pass before you can put up your hands and ask questions. You should all the way through his talk feel free to ask questions. And I've asked him to leave a lot of time where you have tons of time to ask questions. But please, if there's anything you don't understand or anything that you want to ask him about, just put up your hand. He very much said to me before, Jeff wants very much for this to be interactive as much as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn you over to Jeff. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Post one. Maybe a couple things. One, if you don't ask questions, I will call on you. I use the Socratic method, and so be warned. First, I'm going to tell you just 2 seconds about how I got to where I am, i.e. at Millennium Promise. More just perspective. 2, talk about Millennium Promise a little bit, exactly what we do as a mission, what things that we have learned along the way as we're building our organization. 3, talk about some models that I have seen. I'm really interested in using private models and applying them in the nonprofit world and being an activist at the board level in the nonprofit world and make it more efficient and effective. And then lastly, some miscellaneous things. I'm going to ask you for 2 things for advice for us at Millennium Promise. One is on the social networking side, particularly use of technology. The second one is the use of the many different well-known personalities that we have associated with the group, but still haven't really figured out how to intelligently use them, so we haven't used them at all, actually. So the first topic is, how did I get here? I've done private equity investing. I took the group up back in 1983 at an old chemical bank, Chase, Manufacturers Hanover, what became JP Morgan. So I started up an enterprise in a large corporation. And that's one career path. And that's, at the end of this, what I'd like to have you think about is, well, you may be doing a business plan, saying I'm going to start up an enterprise on my own, nonprofit enterprise, whatever it might be, something that's in the middle. In the end, you don't have to necessarily go out and do it all on your own. Sometimes you look around and identify what organizations are doing similar things. So what I did is found an organization that needed to start up a private equity group and didn't know it. And so I had to go in and basically put a business plan together and convince them on how to do that. And they let me set it up, and over the years we were successful investing. In the end, by the time we spun out of JP Morgan, we had about $30 billion in assets, and we were a global operation in Asia, Latin America, Europe, as well as the US, doing venture capital, mezzanine investing, leveraged buyouts, and we had side pools for hedge funds. So this is, you can do this. You can find ways to connect your idea to a larger enterprise and still control it, still be an entrepreneur. So social entrepreneurship as opposed to entrepreneurship necessarily. I did that over the years, but along the way kept balance in my life. My wife wouldn't say that, but I would say that in the for-profit and the non-profit balance. And so I was always interested in this. It's not like, gee, a year and a half ago I retired and now all of a sudden I said, no, I'm interested in the non-profit side of the world. So to me, that fit me better, having kind of a balanced viewpoint. I was chairman of my board of ed in Town in Connecticut for 4 years. I was chairman of Monticello, which is Jefferson's home, for 5 years on the board for 10. I was chairman of the undergraduate business school there as well. I did a whole lot of things. So about 10 or 20% of my time was always this. I always liked growth. So what that means is we help start up companies. We started up Office Depot. We had 2 stores. We started up Petco. JetBlue was a startup. We sat there with Jeff and David Nealman in the early days of it. Loved the early startups, but also the growth stages. So we invested in something called Cabela's, which is the largest fishing catalog retailer around. AMC Theaters, it was growing. House of Blues, when that was growing as well. So a lot of interesting, and then some boring, mundane ones. But I like the ones I really got passionate about, that I connected with, were the ones that were growing. So the entrepreneurs were thinking about, what do I do next? How do I scale? How do I set a model up? How do I prove that? And so I found that always interesting. Over time, we did larger and larger deals, and honestly, a couple of years ago, it got less interesting. So over the 25 years of doing that, I got more balanced toward doing nonprofits, toward giving back, trying to figure out how to do that efficiently and effectively. You have to be active. What I was always used to was a private equity model, which is you're activist board member, you're changing the management team, you're there for the life of the duration of that investment, that's 5, 6, 7 years, and you build partnership with other firms potentially coming in, and hire and fire managers along the way, and build really hopefully solid expertise in human capital selection. And how do you pick a CEO to make those changes? So it's natural for me now, once I started to lead the business world mostly, still on some boards and things, is say you need to use a lot of those tools and techniques. So aren't a lot of the same skills in putting together a growth venture capital deal the same ones that potentially could be used in nonprofit? And bottom line, it works. A lot of the tools and techniques that we bring to bear make our startups more effective. I'll talk about Millennium Promise in more detail, but some other ones we started up, a friend of mine and I started up something called InPower, which is a nonprofit focused on bringing technology to nonprofits around the country. We started it up about 9 years ago. We got Microsoft and Accenture and Robin Hood Foundation and JP Morgan Chase were the original sponsors and funders. It was just us and an idea, found the exec director, and today it's national. We have 12 locations, and we're rolling out and scaling in a pretty substantial way. We do workforce training as well. So it was a startup and growth, and everybody points at that as a real successful model. In fact, Robin Hood says it's the most successful startup they've ever seen because we accomplished every goal along the way. We set a business plan, we set a mission, we set a board that was active. It was actually fun to go to the board meeting because we'd have 8 or 9 people sitting there talking to each other, doing constructive things as opposed to just reporting. We had an exec director that actually listened and said, I want to work in partnership with you. And part of the problems many times in the nonprofit world is exec directors have these visions, and they bring people on their boards who can give them money. When the board starts talking back, they don't listen. That's not very effective long term. So how do you use not only, how do you measure performance? So you use a lot of the same kind of skills that we set up measurement systems in the for-profit world, you just measure different things. So there's a whole list of things that we saw as key success factors that we've applied now in the nonprofit world. Set up another growth enterprise recently with Bank Quincy Jones. We're focused on bringing music back to kids. And so one of our key measures, again, one of the interesting points, one of the things to learn is simple measures. So what we're measuring now in our success, which we're building a partnership and a lot of related organizations in the music industry, is to increase the percentage of kids who are in music programs at K through 12 years. That's the measure. And so we have 40 organizations that have come together. We're all meeting a sponsorship at Time Warner on the 29th of April. And we have Juilliard, New England Conservatory, Berkeley School of Music, USC School of Music, Save the Music, Lincoln Center Jazz, Wyndham Marsalis as well, a bunch of people, Usher, a bunch of guys coming in basically saying, we all are working on the same issue, gee, we actually need to work together. And Quincy's the glue that pulled that together. And so I think it's fun. Music was important to my life when I was an undergraduate and when I was in high school. And so it carried on and changed my life. You pick the things you're passionate about and go deep into them. So Millennium Promise started up in 2005, but really got funded and rolled out 3 years ago. And its mission is to focus on identifying ideas, tools and techniques that will eliminate poverty. We do that by prototyping these ideas, by testing these ideas, by focusing on one continent, Africa. We're in 14 countries. We're in 10 countries, 14 clusters. We have a little over 400,000 people that we have in our villages that we support, and those are prototypes, those are tests. Those are models that we're developing, saying if we can develop a holistic approach to development at the cellular level, the village level, and prove that you can use this model in different geographies, different political environments, and successfully transform those villages to sustainable levels, then we have something. Then we have something that other people can use as a model that they can then take themselves and roll it out. That's scalability. One of the key tests and a lot of key questions a lot of people have is, gee, that's a nice idea. It's nice to affect 200 people, but how can it scale to national levels and how can it scale to world and global levels? And some ideas can't. They're really hard. But our goal was to not work on those ideas that are smaller ideas, is to work on models that are transformational, that can virtually eliminate extreme poverty. So
did you from the outset know that this was going to be a transformational model? I mean, at what point did you and the people who were working with you on this all of a sudden say, was it from day one, day 15?
None of us were wanting to work, none of us would have worked on this if it weren't transformational. And none of the funders would have put money behind it. So when we went out first with our pitch, it was, this could change everything. That we have advantages over others. It's not just the guy named Jeff Sachs, who's one of the co-founders, but it's a group of people at Columbia, Earth Institute, where they have 600 professors, 150 are focused just on this core issue in a lot of different deep areas, saying we have an advantage, we have the skills to be able to develop those models. A lot of people are skeptical. People in the World Bank looked at us and went, wow, we've tried all this before, this won't work. So there was a lot of naysayers. A lot of people saying, this is another one of these harebrained ideas where you just throw money at stuff, and of course that'll work, and once you pull the money away, it'll go back to where it was. But we had some visionaries, and so in the finance question, how do you start an enterprise? It's similar to a venture business, at least our experience, in that you find the angels. Find those who buy into the vision, because you don't have it. All you got is the vision. And sometimes I've had people tell me, sometimes it's easier to raise money for a vision than it is reality. It gets harder actually a little bit as people start learning. So that's what we did. And over less than a year, we raised $120 million from 62 high net worth individuals. The largest one was George Soros, who gave us $50 million. And the goal was to support prototypes, 80 prototypes at the village level over a 5-year period. So we invested $1.5 million was the original idea, and that's approximately $70 per individual per year to support them. And do it over that 5-year period and focus on 4 different things. Focus on education, healthcare, infrastructure, and agriculture. Those are the 4 deep areas. If you focus on those, is the theory, and develop a village so that it can sustain itself by focusing on those 4 areas, then it can build and start building businesses on top of that. It can be a great foundation for growth. That was the theory, and we measured it along the way. So, proving to these individuals who committed their funds to us that we were on path, we had to do this with Soros, we had to develop data collection. So you have to support your funders with a lot of data, not a lot, but some key data that show that you're on the path that they should continue to fund you. And so we measured things like number of bed nets distributed. And over time we said, okay, we're going to measure incidence of malaria, number of kids in school lunch programs, percent of eligible children going to school, output, something that's more easy to measure, which is agriculture output. And so we measure all of those, and we have the actual data collection in each of our clusters, and key punchers and data again, because it's hard to do on a non-real-time basis. And that goes back to the donors. A quarterly report, and then a more in-depth annual report, and we have an annual meeting, actually. A lot of them come into New York, and we present to them. And so it's just like in a private model, where you have your investors, and you have your investor reports. They expect things from you in order to keep funding. So it's just a different measure of success. Now, along the way, just our measures off the top in 2.5 years, and it's audited, is that we have increased production on average across all villages of maize and grain by 2 times. And that's with fertilizer and seed. We've decreased incidence of malaria by 85%. So people really are using the bed nets. These are insecticide impregnated bed nets. We have increased eligible children going to school by 25% on average. And so part of the problem was girls were spending 2.5 hours a day getting water. They weren't going to the schools because they didn't have restrooms for women. And they had to take care of their sick kids, parents, everything else. So now, because we've gone in and hit a lot of the areas, food, health, and all, they can actually now go to school and stay in school. And so that's
In regards to the water question, how did you respond? I've heard that like a whole bunch of a number of like village techniques, such as like hippo water rulers and things that just cut time down in transporting water for people that are spending much of the time. I'm just interested in how you resolve it.
So the question was, what do you do on the water side? Water is one of the most, there's been more innovations in water than anything else. And there's play pumps, there's pedals, there's all these different, and Israel actually has some great irrigation systems we've been working on to pump up. So what we do is drill water, and is bring them sand, rocks, some core basic things, and use our engineers to go and identify where the best place to drill is. That's one of the key items is, and then let them do it. Bring in some equipment, but they do it, and that's one of the key aspects of what we do, which is what people like, which is the village take ownership. And so we have a water that figures out in their particular area where to go, how deep to go, and how to get that going. And then with donors, when you come in, some are interested in water in particular, or others, you take it to the villages. And so what you want to do in these angels, or those that are funding, is you take them there. You get them connected. So one of the secrets that we had to raise the money is that we had people adopt the village. They're supporting a village. So then we reported about that village to them. We talked about the overall operation too, but that village, all of a sudden they had personal ownership. All of a sudden when they wanted to take a trip after. I've been a lot of times, and I've taken my family as well, and there's nothing better than your 17-year-old son seeing and sitting with these kids in their classroom, having lunch, and starting to play with them, as opposed to hearing about it, when you're back in New York. It's transformed many of our donors when they go there and they take their kids there, because it became the #1 thing in their lives as opposed to one of the top 10. So part of the art as well is making this so that it is one of the top 2 or 3 things in a particular donor's life that's important to them.
So I'm a little confused. So you're trying a lot of different tools and techniques right now in the villages, or at the time frame you're talking about. How did you decide those tools and techniques? Were they like methodically we're going to try these 4 methods, and how did you determine those 4 things? I'm just trying to wonder, like, right now, are you randomly testing different things, or are you trying to see whether this method A is going to work and become scalable?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, gee, you're still just trying a lot of different things with the development side, particularly the village level. Are you honing in on what you think is an appropriate model? We started with a model. We started with a lot of ideas that were already proven in a lot of other different areas. Asia, for example, has been through the Green Revolution years ago. We have ECROFT, so one of our core partners is UNDP, which is the development arm of the UN. ECROFT is one of the affiliates of the UN. They tested agriculture and know exactly what nitrogen fixing plants to use, and exactly what, all this is not brain research. It's all simple. Gee, you have to bring fertilizer into small crop growers or their land will not grow crops. If you give them new seed, you will double or triple their output and production. So you have to give them access to that. And the aha for us, for example, in Malawi, which was famine state 3.5 years ago, was use voucher program. So instead of charging each of the small holders and small farmers, a certain amount per bag of fertilizer, and saying, why can't they afford this? Well, they're making $1, a day. How are they going to afford it? They've got a big bag of fertilizer. So you got to prime the pump. And that's kind of the art of what we do is we're priming the pump in the village level. So we're priming the pump in fertilizer. So in Malawi, for example, the entire country used our model to roll out a voucher system. So in 1 year, every small farmer got a bag of fertilizer. Output of Malawi, trouble. Malawi became a net exporter in grain. When I was there 3.5 years ago, we saw babies dying because of lack of food. So it allowed them and taught them how to grow, and the president of Malawi was the old Secretary of Agriculture of Malawi, and stayed in and said, I will not listen to what the World Bank was telling me to do, and what the US government was telling me to do, which is vouchers are a dumb idea. You can't just give away fertilizer. Nobody will appreciate it. It won't work. I said, forget it. I'm going to use actually the Millennium Village model, and it changed everything. And so it's a lot of things that we thought were right, that we tried, and a lot of them are. Some of them aren't, like fertilizers costing us a lot more than we thought. So we had to change the village model and say we're going to raise more money. So it's learning along the way, but we have a lot of experts and all that are telling us a lot of things that we can use along the way, as opposed to just experimenting on the top. What we're experimenting in is financing programs, like in the agricultural side, actually being able to get the farmers so they can get a co-op going, and so they can then set up their own loan systems. So instead of each year trying to figure out where we can get money, have them actually work together and share funding and financing liabilities. Much scaled up from e-bank strategy, because in Africa the key issue for them is agriculture strategy. So a lot of the microfinance institutions only lend to smaller ideas, like here's the new sewing machine you can go get, or here's the cow you can go buy. Whereas ours are really the whole village lives on its agricultural strategy. So how can we help them, instead of finance systems, how can we help them get crop insurance? We're working with Swiss Re, for example. That's the grand experiment. They've never had crop insurance. Nobody's ever been able to figure that one out. So yeah, we are playing with different ideas, but the core of the model, that core of the village model, and we thought we had that down, and we're just proving it, because a lot of people, it worked in different deep focused groups, water or education or others, but nobody actually pulled it all together in one village in one place. Created that foundation and core.
Just for where this is in part coming from, where Sarah had at the end of 2 classes ago, we talked about Harlem Children's Zone.
Yeah, Jeff.
And she had raised a question about the ethics of going into different environments. And there he has a particular set of theories that he's basing his change model on. And what ethical responsibility or standard do we hold ourselves to when we go in and, in some cases, change the social fabric of these communities that we're working with? And have you ever encountered this? Do you encounter this both as a member of a board as well as the member of setting up these different organizations? But Sarah had raised what I thought was a really excellent question. I mean, where are these theories of change coming from, and do we have a responsibility, let's say being from a developed country, going in either to inner city here, or we're going into, let's call them more vulnerable populations, and putting forward a new model, sometimes of social interaction with those groups of people.
I guess I've never seen it go bad, so
Okay.
that's part of the problem. Well, every time we go in, it's an empowered model, so it's committee level, so they do it, village should do it, it is theirs. So when you go there today, they'll talk about, we did this, this is what we are doing now. And literally, I was talking to a farmer who raised livestock, and he took me through the science of crossbreeding, and this is what we're doing, and here's the test over here, and here's the over, and so I was talking to the guy who's expert, I said, he's smarter than you are. And he is. Are you going to try to do more cows or less? Well, less, because we're going to try to increase the yield. This guy hadn't been through high school, but he knew it, and he was talking like it was his, which is the cool part, if you can get that source of ownership and pride saying, we're giving you some tools and giving you some resources. If you don't do it that way, then I think it is an ethical issue if you walk away and all of a sudden, they were dependent on you and no longer, you can be around. But if you can actually get it so that and we tell them all along the way, we could be walking away tomorrow and they all say, we're better because of the association. I've had women's committees report to us, and the women do all the work in Africa, and the men are all just hanging around in our villages, and because they want real jobs, not jobs doing agriculture or farming or taking care of their kids or anything else. And so you talk to the women, all of a sudden the women are really empowered. They're walking in going, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we want. And men are kind of going, okay. And so one of the Millennium Development Goals is actually focus on women's empowerment. That's happening. And so you see a whole set of people all of a sudden starting to take charge of their own life experiences. So I guess so far, not yet. What I always had a problem with is this national strategy. And what we used to see is guys like the World Bank who spent $500,000 on mosquito and malaria research, but never bought a bed net. And so when you spend $500 million doing that, $500 million, and not having any impact, and going on a national level where you say, I have to put money and go talk to the president and Secretary of Health, and we'll give them money and then we'll figure out how to distribute it, and it gets lost. To me, that's the corruption model, right? As opposed to going in at the core, the cellular level, the village level, and say, let's make sure the bed nets get bought, make sure that they get taken to the villages and distributed correctly. We're doing it through the International Red Cross. And so we have a spin-off program called Malaria No More, which one of the co-founders, Ray Chambers, became envoy to the Secretary General of the UN. What his insight was is that we have to actually work together. Huh. So he knew some people in the White House, got Laura Bush involved in a White House summit. I talk like that's really easy, but for him it was. But then he called the Gates Foundation and said, you're doing a lot of work on malaria, but it's all research into trying to find a cure. Right. I think you should buy bed nets. No, we're not going to buy bed nets. We're going to find a cure. He says, that's the wrong strategy. I think you ought to do both. He went to the Global Fund, which was set up to do tuberculosis and AIDS research and AIDS impacts. It may not expand the malaria allocations, but it's the easier thing to do. We will lower, 1 million people die a year of malaria in Africa, half of them are kids. We can eliminate virtually all of those if we distribute bed nets and do some spread. So we got Global Foundation, Global Fund, World Bank, White House, member of the G7 to support a focused effort in malaria bringing bed nets to Africa. Last September, they got a commitment of $3 billion to go do that. So within the next 5 years, malaria will be done at least 85% in Africa. So you save 850,000 lives a year. That's how Ray convinced the Gates Foundation. He said, you got to do it because 850,000 people are dying every year while you're just sitting there trying to figure out how to cure it. You're right, we need to do both. So these partnerships and these associations, there was no new information here. There was no new tools or techniques. It was actually just pulling people together. That you can do in the nonprofit world much easier than you can do in the for-profit world.
So I have a specific question about the fertilizer example. Earlier you mentioned that the model was not to just throw money at the problem. and make this sustainable through empowering people and bringing these tools and techniques to them directly. So I was curious, with that example of fertilizer, if you bring these individuals, the amount that they need to increase productivity by 2 to 3 times, how do you make something like that where you're directly providing that resource to them? How do you make it so that next year they're not, again, seeking a voucher? How does that become sustainable?
What do you think?
I frankly don't know. I guess from that productivity, they now have the funds and the knowledge that they need to buy that fertilizer. Is that the...
Sound good?
I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
that I imagine would cycle back, but I don't know if the products are enough to do that.
That's, all of a sudden, they're producing 2 to 3 to 4 times more. So they're probably making more money. And what they did was they got together and built warehouses. And so they all stored their grain. So they were able to put it in place so that they didn't have to sell it all at once. They can actually wait for times, there is seasonal variations in pricing, so you can actually wait for times that it actually sells for a lot more. They could get together, and we brought Opportunity International in from Malawi, for example, and actually set up some micro banking. And so they came to the village, once every couple of weeks, and actually can build little accounts, so they can save some money on a co-op basis. And so save the money for next year when they need the money to go buy the fertilizer. It became, a virtuous cycle.
So then,
But they had to have something to start.
right. So then, is the vision then to kind of start with these initial programs and then phase that out after there's
Absolutely.
Okay.
To me, there's it's not a black and white. I think in social entrepreneurship, people get stuck in this a little bit. To me, you have the for-profit guys, you got the social entrepreneurs, and you got the philanthropy-oriented models. And the Millennium Promise, I would say, is kind of in this area, saying let's prime the pump. And you got to talk to your donors about this, where are you? And so I'm priming the pump as a donor, but I'm not going to do this forever. So at a village level, agriculture, healthcare, I'm not going to fund the healthcare systems for them forever, I'll build clinics, but government needs to be helping fund some of this, or the village needs to be helping some of this. And so what we're trying to change is the pie at the village level from being, more than half subsidized to maybe a quarter subsidized. That's a huge jump. And potentially some of the subsidies coming from larger entities, some of the G7 countries or other NGOs who say this is a good model, I'll fund it. But we had to test it. So you're getting through this couple year period where you're saying, we'll fund this, we'll show you how it works, but then you got to change the funding model. So we at Millennium Promise are in this kind of philanthropy model saying we're going to give money away just to get something accomplished. But we're going to then start it so that it's at the point where then social entrepreneurship can take over. So after the 3rd year, we start working on business development ideas. And so as you've gotten the healthcare and the education, the agriculture kind of addressed, then you say, okay, well, let's at village level in Malawi, no, in Mali, for example, you'll have a shea butter project going, where all the women will collect shea butter nuts and put them in one place, and shea butter turns out to be great additive to cosmetics. And so you can actually have them, instead of just collecting the nuts and sending them off and having some middleman make all the profits, because there's huge profit opportunities there. You say, let's build a co-op, let's actually process it ourselves, let's actually get it, and it's cheap to do, and we've gotten some tests already going, so they can create their own little business and take a lot more of the profit and keep it for themselves. Same thing in the cocoa business, et cetera. So we have a lot of business ideas that start kicking in here that are your social entrepreneurship ideas. We have sunflower seed processing that we're raising $1.5 million for, that's a 5 times your money deal. That'll be in Ethiopia, that we're going to do with a local partner and doing this cluster, and they're going to make a lot more money. We have a honey project that we're setting up. Some Israelis are going to come in and actually fund, because there's a big market for that in Tel Aviv. We've got a whole series of these. There's like 15 different ideas depending on the cluster. And so at some point, you prime the pump enough so that they can sustain themselves and they can stay in school and get educated enough so that then they can take it on their own. And then potentially long-term, it turns into just a core standard for-profit model. And we're working with other funds in Africa, the Zephyr Fund, for example, and others that are focused on this end here, you know, private equity, venture capital, kind of pure, 30%, 25-30% rates of return. And so what they want to see is these ideas that'll flow up to them. And so if you can identify some of these models saying, I've got a good idea we're developing here and testing, then it turns into potentially a local regional successful business that then could potentially come into this larger idea. That's an interesting set of characteristics. So it's not black or white as to it's good to make money or bad to make not make money. I mean, I had Acumen Fund as one of the biggest, is one funder out there, and the founder, Jack Novogratz, a friend of mine, and we've had this argument on bed nets, for example. And she kept saying, you know, you have to charge for bed nets, everybody's going to appreciate it. Well, when you're making $1 a day, you can't afford a $5 to $10 bed net, depending on if you're going to need to for your family. It's going to be low on your list. Instead, find who can be funders of it. Instead of charging the villagers, charge the National Red Cross. They're the ones that are willing to raise the money for it to pay for it, and they changed everything. So they had a company that's set up in Tanzania called A to Z, which makes all the bed nets now, along with Sumitomo. They created a great business with lots of jobs, and now it's a virtual sector. So it's trying to identify those business opportunities that you can create, but we're not bad because we're giving the money away, which the U.S. government used to think. They're changing their minds today, by the way, but they used to think bad model. We have to, if we're going to give money, we're going to give grain. Well, that didn't help anybody. You know, have to learn how. But this is a continuum that you can ride up and down on, saying this helps this, that helps this. That a philanthropic model can support a social entrepreneurship model, which then can create a for-profit business. Justin?
Yes, I'm really interested in the whole measuring social impact idea. And you mentioned before that you provide these quarterly reports to the people who give, and I think that's really neat. But my question is, you seem to have a lot of different things going on in these villages, agriculture, water, all these different projects. I guess number one, how do you decide how to allocate the assets to different projects? And number two, I mean, I guess, and part of that is, do you create some sort of a model and figure out which ones have the most aggregate impact, and how do you compare impact across different categories of different things?
So yeah, we have a village model. And we have certain dollars allocated by village. And then with experience, it'll change somewhat, depending on the village. But there is a core level of healthcare support, a core level of education, we can measure that. And we allocate out of the $1.5 million, actually now it's $2 million because of fertilizer inflation and changes. But yes, we allocate that. And that's kind of the deal, is we have to develop some kind of funding model that's predictable. So now we've proven, for example, the village level, which we're still educating people on that, but most people, particularly UN and World Bank and some others, said, yes, you have a great model. But now it is scalable. How can you scale it? So how do you come up with a standard allocation across each of those 4 interventions that I can say in Mali, for example, there's a proposal to roll out 166 villages just in the country. Because the great question for us today is how you scale at a national level. It's nice, you guys do a good job at the village levels, but you know, it's tougher when you go to the national model. You know, it's tougher when you're trying to roll it out. Well, we agree with that. So now we have 5 countries actually that have come to us and said we want to roll these village models out. Senegal, Ghana, Tanzania, Malawi, Mali. And please help us do that in Nigeria. Actually, Nigeria has raised its hand and said, we'll pay for it. Because we have oil, we can afford to pay for it. We just need a model. Can you help us come in with this model? So the model's not exactly the same every time, but it starts out the same and it morphs with it.
So instead of basically focusing on different types of giving, like giving to healthcare, improving water, improving agriculture, you basically create a package deal, figure out what are the best aspects for that package, and then throw that off and measure impact on that. Is that accurate?
We focus on the village law model and the business development on top of that, so we're funders of a little bit. But we may sell it differently. We make it donors that are attracted in a different way. Most of the original ones are focused on a village. Understand that that's kind of the core measurable point.
communes if you're in a French country. We're in the mode now where you're sitting there going, instead of giving somebody who can commit $1.5 million or $10 million, or getting a couple of people who can do it together, you're sitting there going, well, okay, how about $250,000? What do you do for that? You know, maybe you build a school for that. Maybe you build a clinic for that. But we're not changing our strategies because of our donor strategy. Our strategy is our strategy. And so now we're just saying, let's look at that and figure out another way to get a donor to connect to us, to connect to our model that they can afford, but they can still own. So my question to you, I have two points. Here's one of them. Think about, and then I'll come back. Is we have an amazing number of supporters, particularly in the technology world. And so we, for example, have the Facebook guys. This was a woman who's the chief operating officer, who's a really strong supporter of ours, and a guy named Joe Green, who was one of the original Facebook guys, who set up something called Causes. And they have given us an application in Causes inside Facebook, which is going to be the Millennium Promise site. We're going to do a Sim Village. So I don't know if any of you have heard Sim City and all, but this will be a Sim Village. And so you'll pop on it, and it'll pop up a little screen, and have people walking around, and you'll have props over in one corner. You'll have school over another one, or a place for one at least, or a place for a clinic, and you'll have a place for water and other infrastructure items. And you can click on any one of those, and a little video will pop up and explain why this is important to the village integrated model. And then you can actually contribute to the construction of one of those items. So $10 will go in and buy some bricks for a school, and you'll see little bricks pop up. And then some more people will do it once this school gets built. And then once it's funded, we'll go build it. And then we'll send you to a wiki site that you can go and track how that school's doing. You see pictures of the school and everything else. And so you get a small donor connection to a large point, to a large enterprise. So we've got this underway. Its betas are out now, and we hope to have it out by, I don't know, April, May. We'll see. And it's supplied, all the data and information is supplied by Good Magazine. It's a magazine that one of our board members, Ben Goldhirsch, is contributing all of the data behind a lot of this, as well as we're providing a lot of the videos and support. And we actually might bring one of these, some of these flip HD video cameras to the villages and pop up some reports on the village levels. And so it's trying to make that small donor feel connected. So it's the big question we've all been working on from the Obama campaign on, which is how do you make small donors feel connected to the bigger cause and get them to continually support it. And so we've also gotten a lot of the bloggers who are talking about Millennium Development Goals and development. Let's get them together. And so we have volunteers there. We had the guys, old Yahoo guys on our LinkedIn's, and they're going, we want to help. We have too many volunteers. How do we pull it together? How do we pull in and get a technology strategy that makes sense for us so that we can build advocacy about what we're doing, awareness, and funding? So, you know, to me, this is really interesting and got a real high level of opportunity and potential. And so the Gates Foundation actually gave us a little bit of money to start building the awareness side, because they think Millennium Development Goals are important. And they think people around America are more aware. People overseas are, and you go to the UK and Europe, everybody knows what Millennium Development Goals are. Blurred almost everybody. Nobody here in the United States. So let's talk about poverty instead of Millennium Development Goals. I don't care what you call it, but let's go after each of the items and start making people aware and start getting them connected. So my question to you to think about in a couple minutes is, what do you do? What do you guys who are actually using it, that are driving it, you know, think we ought to be doing to connect it all together, to develop that social network? We're talking to Ning as well. Ning is a social entrepreneur, social network site, which allows you to develop your social networks. And it's cookie cutter, it's very cheap. A lot of causes have already been built around it. Should we use that? How do we pull that all together? So think about that. That's how we're trying to build a sustainable funding model, getting back to finance for us. So we've got these angels, but you can't go back to these angels and raise another $1.5 million very frequently. It doesn't work. You got Soros, who probably can go back and get some more money from, but at some point he's going to say, I'm done. I like the early stage stuff, but you know, at some point either it works or it doesn't.
we're working with the G7 and the UN and others on roadshows saying, okay, we need to test these national models, and we need to get funding for these villages going forward. But we're developing a lot of innovation, and we need some more predictable fund flows. And can one of those big sources be our annual funding, which could come partly from an online capability? Think about that.
Okay.
Two things. One, the Facebook application sounds really awesome. I think if there's any way that, I'm sure all of us would be interested in beta testing or at least seeing the application, so if there's any way we could get access to that, I think that'd be absolutely awesome. The second thing was, and this is more of a high-level question, so sort of given your very accomplished background in the private sector, I think people trust you to make things happen. And really, I think, how much do you think getting the Millennium Foundation off the ground was attributed to the idea or to the people and the reputations involved in that particular project? Because as Harvard students interested in social enterprise, what is it that we should do? Should we do something in which we can demonstrate, value add, some degree of success, and then move into the nonprofit sector, or is there some other way to go about it?
And your gut is?
At least for me, at least right now, I think later on in life, I'd be very interested, very passionate about jumping into the nonprofit side. I think initially, sort of is similar route that you took, I think is the way I see it.
Yeah, right, agree with that? Yeah.
Brian. It's you, Brian.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of tend to agree with that because I think part of being able to go and speak to some of the angel investors or George Sorensen is you have to also be able to tell a story and demonstrate past success, and in order to be able to raise the money and be able to apply to
Marge?
I think that it's important to do what you like and what you're really passionate about. So if long term you really see yourself doing nonprofit related stuff and philanthropy, then while you may gain valuable skills by spending time in the for-profit sector, if you're not going to be working on the things that you care about, I think you're wasting your time to some extent, because the world is big enough today that you can find a place for yourself in the nonprofit sector where you can grow and become, gain experiences and make contacts there just too long.
So one of the original points you made was advantage to the network. Gee, you've been doing this a long time, so you have people you can call and places Ray Chambers called the White House. I mean, come on, you can't call the White House, right? If you talk to Ray, and you talk to a lot of people like Ray, you ask them what, if they had to change anything, would they change? They all say they would have gone into the nonprofit world sooner. Because they're having a great time. They feel like they're accomplishing a lot. Ray entered it when he was 46. Ray is 65. But it is your network, no question. And so going somewhere where you can continue to build a network, absolutely. That would be one of my criteria is where am I going to go continue to grow? Honestly, I never went this route, but going an investment banking route where you go work as an analyst, not that that's possible these days, but for 2 years where you're going to do spreadsheets, and Xeroxing, this is not a good thing. How does that help you? Yeah, it used to set you up for business school. Now it doesn't do that. Really, I've written recommendations for kids going into HBS or Stanford, and they didn't get in anymore. And they used to all get in, right? Because what do I need another guy at Goldman Sachs, for 2 years and then going, it's just, that is not. I'm not telling you there's a path. My phrase is, if you think you're on the right path, you're on the wrong path, because there is no path. Seriously, there is none. You have to make your own. But Goldman Sachs' path doesn't work anymore, right? And so going back to the path where you're kind of picking out your passions, I agree. You figure out where you can connect. The reason I did well when I was, leaving undergraduate and business school, I was passionate about setting up a private equity group. They could see I really wanted to do it, and I worked all my time, 24 hours trying to figure out how to do that. Going to work for a Millennium Promise, Teach for America, You know, some organization that's grown, that's got interesting people, that's got interesting ideas. You get that experience that's leverageable. It's buildable. You know, if you go to, I know Wendy Kopp, you know, who you work for. You know, if I know people that said, I worked for Michelle Reed. Okay, good. You built in a whole set of expertise around what a chart is. And you understand how to go do that and how to change things. Build your network, but go deep. This is, you know, take it for what it's worth, but, you know, pick one or two things that you can really go deep in. And get some expertise in and build your network in, and then it'll all start growing. No question. In social theory, there's nodes of people who, in companies and nonprofits, who are the ones that all the information goes through. A lot of them are informal. So these are the people that everybody calls saying, you know, gee, Sam, what's going on? Can you tell me what to do, or can you help me here? That's where you want to be. You want to be in the middle of those nodes. You want to be the node that everybody wants to talk to or to access. You know, developing your network, whether it's online. That's kind of the theory. This is why online kind of works in social networking, right? But it's always worked. It's worked whenever organization you've ever gone to. So that's my first. And then we're back to how do you
So go
build-
rescind your Goldman offers right now.
I think because it's one of the best. So go back to the funding. So we're trying to figure out, you know, funding models that will continue to allow us to grow. So whether it's the small donor or the medium donor, you have to show progress. And so you have to show measurable results along the way. Part of it is at the village level, you've seen that. But part of it is making sure that our vision is updated periodically. So one of the things you do in the private world is you have leaders who set visions. And you communicate those visions to your board, to your employees, to your funders. And you make sure everybody's on the same, has the same or similar vision, so then you can figure out how to get there. Way too many circumstances where the entrepreneur who's running the nonprofit has their vision, but nobody has a clue what that is. I'm going to help kids. Okay, great. How? I don't know. We're going to hire some people and go do that. We're going to do it in Harlem. You know, Chuck Buchanan didn't have a vision that he could actually say, this is how I'm going to do this. Follow me. It fell apart. There's too many nonprofits like that really have no clear visions. And then updating them. So it's not just the original vision. It's actually 2 years later. We did this. We went through 2 years into Millennium Promise. We changed our CEO. The current CEO, the CEO at the time, great guy, but not the right guy to take it to the next level. And he said that. He's still on our board, Jeff Luke. He said, okay, it's time for me to cycle out. And we got an amazing guy, John MacArthur, to come in. His bio is in the PowerPoint that was sent around. And so that'll help you identify who is the right talent for the right time in your growth strategy.
Following on what Mimei said, how do you build a business?
Build legitimacy?
Yes. As a social entrepreneur, like as a college student, you might have the greatest idea, you might even have a network, but how do you get people to trust you with their money when you don't have a profile where people have trusted with $30 billion before? I mean, that's
So all the ideas in this room, assume each person has an idea. What do you think, percentage-wise, in your opinion, would be the good ideas?
I think all ideas are good.
The diplomat.
You'll lose a lot of money if you have that.
Yeah. I think you know we have our ideas. We are working on them, and at the end we would know what ideas are feasible or not.
So what percent would you think would be successful?
I'd say about 10%, 20%.
Is that high? Do I agree? Is it low or?
What was the number?
10 to
10 to
20%.
20%. High, low?
Only 95% of startups fail. 5%.
At least. No, it's a horrible rate of success. We thought we were smart venture capitalists, you know, in the days. And, you know, we were really happy if we had 1 out of 10 that was the big home run. Really happy. You know, when 2 or 3 that were reasonably successful and 4 or 5 that were walking wounded kind of carried their own and really go where they're supposed to go, and then the rest to the write-off. Those are the really good ones we did a lot of work and research on, and helped fund write, and helped, I mean, come on. You know how many didn't make it to that level? So having ideas is a great thing. And having passion around the idea and working through it is fabulous. But it doesn't mean you have to go do it all by yourself to build your credibility. Your credibility is actually going, taking an idea and being able to say, I can manage my ego well enough so that I can go work with somebody else and listen to their idea and figure out where mine and theirs comes together, and maybe do this together, maybe do it with another operation. Keeping your passion, because if you're in another organization, you got to be a driving force. You got to be, have a view, and this is where you're going to go. But doing it all by yourself, it's really hard. And doing it even just one or two other people, that's really hard. If you want to do it, great, go for it. But I'm going to have a portfolio if I'm going to bet on people, because there'll be a lot of failures. But I would start out building credibility by working with people who are credible.
Something I'm really interested in hearing more about, especially from someone who's been so involved in implementing a somewhat contentious theory of social change, Jeff Sachs's theory of overcoming the poverty trap on the ground. I mean, there's the opposite side to the idea that infusing a ton of aid in all different directions at one community can make change, that, just putting in aid in all these different ways doesn't really do anything. For example, like William Easterly's thesis. And I mean, what I wonder is whether the challenges from like corruption on the local village level, or different community practices that kind of are contrary to the model, like for example, shared land rights or community land rights as opposed to individual farmers, private lots. Are those things that are real challenges to the Millennium Promise project, and is it part of the vision mission to overcome them, or what are the mechanisms that are in place to overcome them?
A lot of questions there. So I'll start with one, as in the Jeff Sachs model. If you don't know Jeff Sachs, it's controversial. He knows every president in the world and can get into virtually any government, which is a real advantage. But he couldn't get into the U.S. government. I mean, I sat next to him at the malaria conference, and under his breath, he was, talking about how stupid, the Bush world was. And I said, this is the White House. Can you kind of like calm down a little bit? But he's an entrepreneur. He knows what he thinks he knows the answer, right? You read his books, they're really cool. But that's not helpful sometimes when you're getting donors that have a different orientation. Now, John MacArthur, our CEO, is really balanced and can listen to both sides. So Jeff helps to a point. But other points, people see as an extreme in view, whereas it's not. Honestly, in the end, we're not an extreme view. We're working with Save the Children. We're working with the Red Cross. We're working with UNICEF. I mean, we're all trying to figure out this together, right? Rockefeller Foundations and Gates are helping us figure out the agriculture strategy in Kenya. We have a joint effort with agro. So it's setting up these partnerships that take away some of the personality. To get this going, it helped to have the personality. There's some people that gave us money just because Jeff Sachs. But then at some point, you have to get to a point where you're saying, it's not the person. It's not the entrepreneur. And there's some nonprofits that never get away from that entrepreneur as the personality that drives all. And those usually, in the end, there is a lot of issues around how do you get people to work together at the village level. We don't focus just on the single farmer. It's usually co-ops. It's usually the whole entire village. Village usually owns the crop. Village usually owns the warehouse, and so it's more of a social model. It's kind of, that's what we found works for us. There are people that would say it doesn't work, and so we just go prove them wrong. So at some point, you just have to go out there and say, here's a model. I had this big argument with the head of the ambassador to Malawi in the United States about the voucher program, the VEDNET program. And he kind of said, and I just, it won't work. Oh, stop arguing. We'll just go show you how it works. So yeah, there's lots of models. We're not right. We just got a model we think is a good way to make it work. and you can use our model, and we've gotten lots of people, Presbyterian Church is starting to use our model, saying this is something to leverage off of, and we like this, and so instead of going to try to figure it ourselves, we build corporations. You know, another funder, I'll get to funding if you kind of that. On the corporation side, we've got Ericsson in to use us as their key development test for wireless. I think that's a huge application for them, so why not they put our villages number one in the queue? And it's amazing, you know, when you sit in eastern Kenya and they get introduced to cell phones, and the first thing they do is go and Google their village. Second thing they did was Google the price of goats and found out they were getting ripped off and started making market goats, like overnight. And so you start going, interesting. And then we start working with community health workers. So community health workers, we're working with Paul Farmer and Partners in Health, and so they're going, how can we bring those to the villages? And they need data collection. You actually need to know what village, they did what to. And how can you get it on a real-time basis? Well, if you have cell phones, it changes everything. So we do a lot of experimenting with Ericsson. We do it with Tyson Foods, which is poultry. And so they're actually bringing their staff and people over to our villages and starting to set up egg-laying operations, showing them how to do it. And why Tyson wants to do this is, one, they think it's the right thing. Their employees are killing to become helpers. They love the idea of coming to Africa for a couple months of that, and working with us. But Tyson says, long-term, internationally, if we build enough egg-laying operations and poultry processing, that then the townships will start being able to support local entrepreneurs to build chicken processing operations, and then being able to expand Tyson's presence internationally. We've done that with healthcare companies. We've done it with companies in America who just want the association. So Quiznos is now going to fund your uniforms with Millennium Promise and do a percentage of their sales in food. And Millennium Promise, go Table for Two, which is in Japan, in corporations and cafeterias, and they do a percentage of the food that's sold in the cafeterias and goes to Millennium Promise villages. There's a whole list of corporations now that we can start getting involved. So going from that angel funding to maybe some longer-term corporate funding. And it's not just the CEOs. You get their employees involved. You get them to believe that they have a village. Nike has one. So Nike has a village, and they support actually girls programs. So in 14 to 18, they want girls to have an alternative rather than the normal alternatives they have, which is setting up their own little businesses. And so in our villages, they're doing tests of that. And so Nike reports on that to their employees, and so they feel connected. So how can you get the corporations involved? Then longer term, you're going to get the governments involved. So as we did in malaria, you're going to get the bigger funders to come in, and you're going to say, okay, we have some models we need you to fund. So you see the cycle, and we have more ideas coming down the pike, so Millennium Promise will always be generating some interesting ideas, we think, to focus on development, that we hope then can get others, corporations involved in. We can get small donors with internet connection to help us support and build awareness on, so that then they'll march on Washington and say, we have to give 0.7% of our GDP to the bottom billion to change everything, or we're going to cause more wars that occur, and we're going to have a lot more problems than that. But you have to do that by building awareness and advocacy and support. You have to do it in the UK, we're doing it in Germany, we're doing it in South Korea. South Korea gave us 4 villages, so we're using each of our villages to be test beds for some of the development support that other countries can do. So South Korea gave us 4, $8 million. Secretary General of the UN from South Korea, and he's very supportive. And they said, this makes total sense to us, because guess how we developed as a country? After the Korean War, there was nothing left. There were the villages. We focused on the villages and developed on us. And we're very proud now that we're a developed country that actually become a donor nation. And so we want to help others focusing on the village side.
So you've mentioned probably literally dozens of organizations, governments, a lot of government, lots of organizations, Ericsson, Tyson Foods, individual venture capitalist funders. How does your organizational structure and Millennium Process look like? Because if you literally have over 100 different contacts, I mean, how do you avoid you have spin-offs and it seems really sprawling, so how do you stay focused? And how do you actually make sure that you're still working towards your goal and it won't just falter?
John, that's a great question. Great point. You have to refocus and get rid of stuff that you were doing that isn't important continually. So we're not doing A level on everything, and that's the frustration. So we're searching, one of our funders is funding a chief marketing officer. We can go a lot deeper with a lot of the corporations, but we're not going deep enough with them. And so we need to develop that team around it. We're lucky to have Earth Institute with us, because they go deep in a lot of these areas. I mean, their alternative energy strategy and experts, when they come into the villages, we couldn't afford it. We don't have the staff. So we use them. If UNDP weren't around, we'd be several years behind. But the UNDP has development staff on ground already in a lot of these countries. Now, we hire locals in and train them in these areas, and a lot of these are, full PhD students who come back to their countries and want to focus and get back. But we leverage off of what's in ground already, and people that are already working on these kind of issues. A lot of these are guiding resources from the governments and the corporations, and just saying, this is a better way to focus, so you're helping them focus. So we have in New York, we have 30 individuals. We have in each cluster about 10 or 12 individuals. We have in regional offices in Bamako, Mali, and Nairobi. It varies. In Bamako, I think there's 25. There's about 20 in Nairobi. But that's not including the UN staff that's working with us full time. The UN staff, half of them who are really buying into this, still to work on our effort, because we take them out of the UN bureaucracy and we actually fund things on a real-time basis that they can get involved in. So we have a virtual network, that's a virtual enterprise that's a lot more broad than necessary.
Kind of going back to your point about corporate funding, I guess my question is there any kind of stigma associated with nonprofits going to corporations and directly asking and giving them kind of a business proposition? So for example, what if, you kind of talked about the shea butter kind of business that you had set up in, I think it was Ethiopia or somewhere, but Mali. So what if you went to L'Oreal and you said, look, you guys spend, right, and you say, look, you spend like $100 million building like a plant or something to create this stuff. What if you give us $1 million? We're gonna make a plant in Mali, and then we'll sell you the shea butter at like half market prices for like the next 5 years. Is that something that you guys can do, or I guess maybe have done, and what is the success of that? No, I mean, I just feel like it might be a...
We were working on that example.
Wow.
Exactly. We're working with Dannon, for example, on the dairy side, livestock, saying, how can we cut out the middleman, how can we get you to come in? That's how we set up pricing. That's how we approach the purchase, and you guys are the experts. So rather than trying to go to some local guys who kind of don't have to know what they're doing, let's go get the experts and help you fund it. And let's set up the right way to core. So, absolutely. That's the core of business development, is trying to figure out, how you set up the business so it has a higher likelihood of success. So it's not a coincidence that the people that are really interested in Millennium Promise are all private equity guys. Head of our development teams, head of APACS, one of the co-heads of APACS, which is a private equity firm worldwide. Jerry Wilson, who used to be CEO of Northwest Airlines, but private equity guy, involved. Some big hedge fund people as well, because they look at the investment side. They said, what am I putting in, what am I getting out, and how I set up a lot of these business ventures. And that's the teams that we have on the committee. How do you get a board to work? This is a whole other big topic. I'm sure I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on, but how do you get a board so it's effective? You get the right people who are passionate, they're willing to give more than money, time, networking, money. How do you get them so that they buy in? Well, you get to set up sometimes committees. And so we'll have some of these guys working on business development ideas just like that, saying, I know somebody at GE, I can get you in, and they're interested in healthcare tools, and we might be able to get you access to a lot of the equipment because they're trying to figure out how to distribute that in Africa anyway. So let me set that up. Maybe there's an enterprise, a distributor we can set up to distribute BP's equipment. Those are all the ideas that come out of the people that are associated with us, as donors, as contributors, and supporters.
You mentioned a lot about your community work and sort of all of the people you have working on this project, from academia, from private equity, from business. Can you talk a little bit about how you, like, high-level decision-making happens at Millennium Promise and how those people all work together, and if it's more of a collaborative thing or if you trust different people and different things?
Yeah, and please don't take it away that this is nirvana. You know, we've got as many problems as most growth companies along the way, and staff and human capital is one of those. And so we've turned over staff as we've grown. Now, that's pretty typical for venture deals, actually. The more successful ones evaluate people very frequently and change them, but our development staff's turned over. We have a new CEO. I became chair about almost a year ago. He became CEO. So we're beefing up the staff and the team. We have an executive committee of the board, which is available a lot to make, kind of core strategic decisions. The board itself gets together once a quarter for updates and once a year. But the CEO runs his operations, so there's a staff meeting he has every Monday morning. There's a lot of telephone and Skype communication, and as well as videos to Africa in particular, to help connect the teams together. It's really hard to have an operation that's cross-border. I've done it for a long time, and it's never easy. This communication is important, getting people together in teams and getting some joint responsibilities so they actually understand who is on the other end of the line and trust them. Because there's a lot of distrust for people that are just getting together. So we're still working on it. We're still building community, but kind of common vision of where we are going, confidence that we're going to be able to get there. And we have a funding model that will allow them to, they don't have to worry about that. And then resources that they know about, that they can leverage. We're still trying to figure that out. There's a lot of resources that, why didn't you call that person? Well, gee, I didn't know about that. Okay, we have to figure out some way to be able to connect people together. One other thing, it's just the other challenge. So we have Angelina Jolie on our board. She has given us 3 villages. We have John Legend, who is an amazing supporter. He's gone on the road with Jeff Saxon in concerts and universities and supported us, and also has done a village. Madonna said this is her #1 charity. Jeff Saxon's wife actually helped get her orphan child out of Malawi and checked up, but she's got a village as well. We have Roger Waters. Have you heard of him? But anyway, Roger's got a village as well, and he's really supportive and played at our last fundraiser and cool stuff. We have Quincy Jones is on our board, we want to do whatever we want, Lots of talent, lots of names. We haven't used them. Because it's kind of like, how do you do that? And not look like, you're just trying, they're more important than the cause. Well, one test is actually making them give money. Most stars don't give money. And so they have done that, and they've supported villages. But how do you use them? How do you use them in internet strategy? So how do you use them if you're going to have a causes in Facebook? Do you do YouTube clips? How do you have them have appearances? UNICEF has people that show up who are, go out on the road with them periodically and, put their name and associated with the cause itself. So, thoughts? What to do with talent?
This isn't really focused on the social network realm, but it seems to me like there are a lot of high-profile people who have a lot going on in their own life, but are really interested in your cause. And it seems like what you're searching for is just recurring revenue, essentially, right? So why not create some sort of a
awareness, advocacy, and funding? Right, any of those would be good.
So why not create some sort of a membership card system, right? Where these high-profile people are part of the network. You get other people part of the network, and everyone who becomes part of the network has to pay a recurring membership fee or something like that to gain access, to be allowed to create, to create a greater impact or something like that, or get more access to the data or more hands-on, a touch of what they're actually doing instead of just giving the money away.
I think you have one one side very well developed, and that's in terms of the Facebook side. And you can see down to the village. The things I think about like Kiva and being the peer-to-peer connection.
Right.
I think you've built the other end of it really well. And now the end is, where do I fit in this picture? Where's everybody else in the U.S. that develop more people that have money in their pockets? Where do they fit in this picture? And I think where these characters come in is perhaps to create that identity that people want to relate to as good citizens. Because it's not necessarily that compelling to be something I don't necessarily relate too well to, just being this kind of like godlike figure working on my computer, like keeping this village up to date, unless I see how that like fits into the rest of my life. And I think these people can be the avenue to facilitate the connection with the rest of my world, the
How do you
other
do
end
that?
of that picture.
How do you use them?
I mean, I think they have to be.
So I'm pitching, if I'm telling the five of them, this is what I want you to do, what do I tell them?
Well, I mean, I don't like how Bono does it in Product Red. I think it's too, like, I'm a god, and that doesn't necessarily,
And nobody knows where the money goes, right? Do you have a clue where the money goes? For red?
Global Fund.
Very good. Everybody know that? Most people don't know that. And most people then don't know what the goal is.
I think you play on the sentiment that you mentioned. You play on the sentiment that we don't want to make them gods, and so you leverage more of them, and you use them in pop advertising. You use them in commercials, similar to Product Red, but different in the fact that more of the time is spent showing the village and showing what's actually going on. But you use them as hundreds of faces popping up at one time, and then your face in between that, so that they're not any different than you are. And if there are enough of them, it doesn't make them feel.
That's a good idea. It's like the Will I Am. You've seen the Will I Am videos that are That's what we're thinking about. We're thinking about this, something like that that turns viral, that makes people go to our site. So an action, some kind of action that keeps them interested. Yeah.
My thing is, I like that idea. That's exactly what I was thinking. Kind of like the Will I Am commercials, exactly. But my thing would be to connect that, because my biggest thing is I don't think people are aware of this program in the U.S. And so the main thing is building awareness, correct? And so you build that awareness, but you can build that interconnectivity, and you link them to, maybe not necessarily to Facebook, but you link them to something that's very similar to that. So not only is it building awareness, but they also know where the money's going to, and they can still interact with that kind of building, the school and whatnot. So that's kind of my thought.
I think building a brand is what is essential to Millennium Promise, because if you look back to one of those don't vote videos that went around right before Obama's election, that really, that focused, that kind of leveraged what celebrities do best. So if you talk about sort of the humanitarian work that Angelina Jolie does, may not fly as well as just her being an actress. So just leveraging their core competencies into something that can help promote your brand as this charity that has, sort of these famous people.
There's a job for you guys out there for a lot of these operations, and Seth Godin, who's a marketing maven, has called it the technology social organizing, community organizing. And it's pulling all these ideas together and making them work, using not just technology, but using connections, the viral network, the videos of the bloggers of it, saying, I'm in the center, I can make this happen. And actually, the CEO at Facebook said, what you guys need is a college student. They said that's what a lot of nonprofits are doing, is go get a college student to go do this, because they're in the middle of it. And what's natural to them isn't natural to necessarily somebody who's beyond their years. So I think it's a great job opportunity in getting in the middle and adding value and getting passionate about it. And building great networks too.
It's all very interesting how we're trying to leverage off of Western celebrities to get donor, to increase donation.
We have African celebrities too.
But
Yusuf,
what about
Yusuf?
using, trying to spread the models, spread the goals by doing stuff on the ground? Using local celebrities to be like, so there's this village doing this and this, it's cool, you guys should be doing something similar, even if they're not doing it through your organization, but so that actually think of them as cool ideas and do it themselves. Because once it turns into something that's kind of, Western centric, the foreign celebrities are doing the whole adopt a kid thing, people on the ground are going to be very skeptical about it. Are going to be very skeptical about the organization, and it doesn't sound like you may even get at some point in time. So I'm just not very comfortable with the idea of it being focused in that one direction.
Totally. And the more we can get local, the better. And so in Senegal, we have Youssef Dour, who's one of the leading physicians in Africa. He's actually supporting his own village. He came from. So I totally agree with that. That would be the best. You know, we could find more of those, absolutely. Okay, one more?
One more, Frank?
One chance would be sort of, I guess, having your celebrities, if they're put on concerts, have you guys sponsor their concert series? And that would allow them to sort of attach the Millennium Promise with the artist, but also at the same time, if there's volunteers to talk about the organization, work you guys are doing, and that would allow them to connect with the individual concert goers who are that to be a way of connecting everyone.
So, yeah, we're working on with Roger, if he doesn't know the tour, Lana did a really great job. Basically said, everybody put your cell phones up and text this number, and text the 4-digit number, and it grabs everybody's cell phone number. I agree, that'd be cool to have a flow of, the more emails, the more text numbers we got, you know, the better. One more?
Perhaps even coming from the going local, is that perhaps partnering with local cell phone companies?
Local software.
Local cell phone companies?
Yeah.
Because that's like sort of one of the sort of large business within Africa, and maybe like part of the sort of like the money that we get for like the service can go towards like towards villages. But I think the cell phone companies themselves are going to be safer to develop these villages because those are potential subscribers once they get to a certain level.
I agree. That'd be great. Yeah. Good idea.
Jeff, I want to say thank you for taking time to connect in New York.